about the role of the diet of whale blubber when it comes to the sperm antibodies. So, was there a relationship in this study? Was there a reason why it wasn't a compound?
Sure. So the reason why the Faroes population are of such great interest is that because of their diet of whale blubber, they are exposed to a lot of contaminants. So those levels of exposure that I showed you are much higher than, for example, the U.S. general population. Much higher. Sometimes depends on the contaminant. The PCBs in particular might be about 10 times higher than what's seen in other parts of Europe and in the U.S. And the same for mercury. So those contaminants sequester in the fat of whale blubber. And so the entire population is getting exposed to much higher levels of environmental chemicals for that reason. Just so, in case you're interested, the Faroes cohort studies that have looked at mercury impacts and neurodevelopmental functioning were heavily relied upon to make recommendations and guidelines for the consumption of specific types of fish, such as swordfish, among pregnant women here in the U.S. So we know specific fish, such as certainly whale, as well as swordfish, as well as, well, tuna, not because it stores contaminants any more efficiently, but because we eat a lot of tuna. Those fish, when consumed during pregnancy, can raise mercury levels that could impact the fetus. And I just want to say that the work done in the Faroes has been used to inform what the guidelines should be nationally for pregnant women and how much fish they should consume. And there's an ability to not just dose pregnant rats or mice and see what happens to the offspring, but rather being able to follow this over time, over 20 years, to see moms eating lots of whale blubber, having and babies born with high cord blood of contaminants had decreased intellectual functioning at ages 7 and 14. So that's the link, that the contaminants come from a whale blubber diet. Does that help?
Yeah.
So in terms of creating a public health message to give to this population, would you go so far as to tell expectant mothers not to consume the whale blubber?
Yes, yes, and they have, and they
Okay.
continue to do that, yes. And that's why, as I said, we will get that documentary, The Island and the Whales, and we'll show it because it gives a beautiful exposure to how the lead medical director and pediatrician on the island, the main island, is counseling families and pregnant moms about their whale blubber consumption. And it's a cultural threat to tell people stop eating whale meat. It is seen as really invasive in a practice that they've been doing for hundreds of years. So it is a public health challenge as well. But it's done in such a well, even-handed way, in an artsy way. I think you'll like the movie a lot. I strongly recommend it. And if you can't see it here, if you can check it out, The Island and the Whales. Have you seen it, Florence?
No, I haven't. Thank you.
You'd like it a lot.
Congratulations, this is really fascinating.
Was it clearly explained?
Totally.
Okay.
I was curious if you know how the DDT levels of the men in the Faroe Islands compares to men in Africa, because I saw that had the steepest decline in sperm count.
Okay, a great question. There are very, very few studies of DDT in Africa. Very, very few. I collaborate, and we'll be going there to South Africa in November. I collaborate with a group that has studied malaria control workers, the guys that are doing the DDT spraying in KwaZulu-Natal, which is in northern South Africa. Their levels are high, but the analytic capabilities aren't that great to really be able to compare these levels. I just went into a lot of detail about the different types of isomers and metabolites of DDT, and so Africa is hard pressed to have that kind of chemical capability. I can attest to that because we've tried to develop it in South Africa. So I don't know exactly, but I certainly know that DDT workers have had impaired sperm function. That's a great question, though. I often say, and I teach the problem-solving section, DDT section, the problem-solving class that many of you will be taking, if you haven't already. And I often say that the decision to ban DDT in this country was entirely based on a wildlife and an ecologic decision. It had little to do with human health effects. We didn't have those data. And the same for the DDT debate in Africa. No one has the capability to do these long-term, painstaking studies that consume 25 years of your career in order to show these sorts of associations. So being able to measure the DDT levels in the population is a challenge in Africa, I'd say. Any other? Yes?
Yeah. It's very interesting that the blood cord levels were stronger in particular. And what does this mean? Does it mean that they generate a permanent effect in spermatogenesis? What does it mean in the continued exposure of men all the time?
Yeah.
Is there no effect from that?
Yeah.
And if there is a permanent effect, well, you might consider the banning of consuming whales. But I don't know. It's very interesting that it's so strong at the blood cord, but later on it's not as strong.
Yeah.
And it is not that it's not a cross-sectional bias, but it is representing a community.
Indeed, indeed. Maybe it was 15 years ago, I was at a meeting with this discussion of the developmental origins of disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a strong feeling that most of the environmental health impacts influencing key health conditions, everywhere from neurodevelopment to reproductive capacity to immunologic function, to cardiometabolic impacts happen in utero. And I just hated that hypothesis. I said, how are we going to study that? You know, we'll just have to stay in the laboratory with experimental animals, because it's really difficult to demonstrate such an association. But Skakiebach would say it's happening in the fetal testis, that as I think it's week 6, as the embryo is forming and the fetal testis is starting to form, if it's in the presence of a chemical milieu, then that is where the most important disruptions are happening. And I just would never have expected that, especially because men are producing sperm all the time.
This recommendation of pregnant women not to eat is worthless, because women don't know that they are pregnant until 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Things like that, and they have already a load of DDT in their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So really a recommendation should be to ban the complete eating of these whales for life, not only for pregnant women.
Mm-hmm.
If you really think in terms of reducing risk.
Great point, great point. And what's the statistic? At least a third of pregnancies are unplanned, so yeah. Even if you were mindful about preconception. Yeah. Plus, they're very enduring. They stay in the body for a long time. So they're reduced to 1/3 of what they were at birth, but they're still very much there.
And
over 30 years.
DDT will be released from your fat during pregnancy.
Yes, during gestation, yes. 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 Peter.
Hi. So I'm also curious, how much research has been done on the whale blubber itself, kind of then and now, as far as other pollutants? I'm thinking plastics uses have gone up, coal use has gone up through that kind of period of time. You could have more radioisotopes, more mercury, things like that. I'd be curious about what else might be a player in that, to really assess the sort of nutritional value versus the pollutant loading of the whale blubber.
Sure. I don't know of it related to whale. I certainly know those discussions have been ongoing for some time related to other fish sources because of all of the beneficial impacts, both in terms of neurologic development in utero, as well as the the omega-3 fatty acids, which are very beneficial for cardiovascular health as well. So those debates have been ongoing. I don't know the current status, the ecological assessment of pilot whale and how further contaminated they are or less so. I know more about the ubiquitousness of these types of chemicals making their way into large mammals around the globe. And certainly we've been seeing a lot more public attention, I think, to plastics. And so I read just the other day something about the number of pounds, 15 pounds taken out of a certain dolphin's belly of plastics, just from having consumed it, just related to pollution.
It's become pretty ubiquitous.
Yes.